The village of Kilvara, nestled in the green folds of southern Ireland, had always been a place time seemed to forget. Its cobbled streets, moss-covered walls, and the single-lane road leading to the old stone chapel gave the impression of a world left untouched by the noise beyond the hills. And inside this quiet corner of faith and fog lived two sisters, Sister Aileen and Sister Brigid Rowan. Twin nuns. Identical in face, opposite in spirit. They ran a modest shop and bakery next to the chapel, a small white building with peeling blue paint, the scent of bread drifting out at dawn. Villagers often said they could tell who had baked that morning by the sound of the hymns humming through the open window. When it was Brigid, the tunes were soft, melancholic. When it was Aileen, they were bright and hopeful, like sunlight fighting through clouds. The sisters were loved, or perhaps more accurately, revered. They'd come to Kilvara in 1979 after taking vows in a nearby convent. The priest, Father Callan, had given them charge of the church store, and soon they become a fixture of the town's rhythm, two figures in gray habits, always together, always smiling. But there was something else people whispered about them, something almost otherworldly. Some villagers swore that when the Rowan twins prayed together, strange things happened. Candles flickered without wind. Bells rang though no one pulled the rope. And one farmer claimed he'd once seen a soft blue light shining from their shop window late at night, though when he told others, he laughed it off, blaming the whiskey. Still, Kilvara was a place that believed in what it could not explain. One evening in October 1993, Father Callan had closed the chapel after Mass and noticed the shop lights still on. It was unusual. The sisters were punctual, never staying past dark. He walked over, umbrella trembling in the wind. The door was unlocked. Inside, the radio was on, playing an old folk hymn. 2 cups of tea sat half-finished, and beside the counter lay a half-folded letter, written in Sister Brigid's careful handwriting. But there were no signs of either nun. No struggle. No footprints leading out into the mud. Just silence, and the faint smell of incense. In Kilvara, nothing ever happened, which made what followed impossible to comprehend. By morning, word had spread like wildfire. The Rowan twins were gone. Villagers searched the nearby lanes, the fields, the forest path leading to the old abbey ruins. Police were called from Cork. They combed the river that ran behind the chapel. They even brought in dogs, who followed a scent for nearly half a mile before stopping, inexplicably, at the church gate, circling and whimpering. Father Callan held Mass that Sunday before an overflowing crowd. He stood behind the altar, his voice breaking. If any of you saw the sisters after Vespers on Friday, if any of you know where they might be, speak now, or pray for a miracle. But no one spoke. And the miracle never came. Before we continue, this story is based on real accounts and archival records surrounding the mysterious disappearance of the Rowan twins. Before we begin fully, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell, because today we're diving into one of the strangest and most haunting unsolved vanishings in Ireland's history. As days turned into weeks, the shop door remained locked. The loaves on the shelves turned hard as stone. A vase of lilies wilted by the window. And the village began to whisper, not about what had happened, but why. Some believed they had fled, perhaps to another convent. Others thought they'd been taken, though by whom, no one could say. But there were a few, mostly the old, who claimed they'd always known something dark lingered beneath the chapel's foundation. One story in particular stood out, about the original church, long before Kilvara existed. It was said to have been built over the ruins of a monastery burned in the 1600s, during a time when faith was a dangerous thing to profess. The Rowan sisters had spent months restoring that very foundation before their disappearance. And that was where the first clue, and perhaps the first warning, would soon be found. The official record says the Rowan twins were last seen on October 22, 1993, closing their shop just after dusk. But Kilvara remembers that night differently. According to Mary Hanlon, who owned the post office next door, she had waved good-night to the sisters at about 8:15 p.m. Aileen had smiled and said, "We'll see you for morning bread, Mary." It was the last time anyone ever heard her voice. The next morning, when Mary went to collect her mailbags, she noticed something strange. The sisters' shop door stood slightly ajar. Inside, the lights were still burning, though the morning sun had already crept in through the windows. 2 loaves sat on the counter, half-baked. The oven had been left on low heat, and next to the register, the half-folded letter still lay there, this time sealed. The letter was addressed to Father Callan. He arrived minutes later, pale-faced and shaking, after Mary sent a boy running for him. He tore the envelope open and read in silence. Inside was a single page, written in Sister Brigid's hand. "We've seen what shouldn't be seen. We'll go to the old ground to pray. If we do not return, the truth lies beneath his house." No one knew what the old ground meant. But in Kilvara there was only one place that fit, the ruins of St. Finan's Abbey, a crumbling stone site 2 miles uphill from the village, long abandoned and half swallowed by vines. By afternoon, every villager, police officer, and farmhand within reach had joined the search. They climbed the hill to St. Finan's as rain began to pour. The path was slick, the air heavy with mist. And then, about halfway up, they found something. At the base of an ash tree, partially covered by leaves, lay one of the sisters' wooden crucifixes, the kind they always wore around their necks. It was broken clean in 2. Search teams combed the abbey until nightfall, flashlights flickering across centuries-old stones. Inside the collapsed walls, someone noticed faint candle marks, as if wax had dripped there recently. And near the altar ruins, the ground appeared disturbed, like something had been buried or dug up. But the mud was thick, and the rain relentless. Nothing more was found. In the days that followed, police from Cork set up a base at the parish hall. They interviewed everyone in Kilvara, farmers, schoolchildren, even Father Callan himself. But the accounts were all eerily similar. The sisters had been cheerful that week. They'd mentioned preparing the chapel for upcoming renovations. And neither had shown any sign of fear or distress. Still, the note, "The truth lies beneath his house," haunted investigators. They brought in forensic teams, who searched the chapel's foundation, the graveyard, even the crawl spaces beneath the altar. But again, nothing. Then came the oddest report of all. A shepherd named Declan Moyer claimed that on the night the sisters vanished, he'd seen 2 figures dressed in grey habits walking across the moors, not toward the village, but away from it, heading east toward the coast. He'd shouted to them, but they didn't turn. He assumed they were traveling to the next parish for a retreat. But when shown photographs of the Rowan twins days later, Declan hesitated. "It was dark," he said. "But if that was them, they weren't walking. They were gliding, like their feet weren't touching the ground." Police dismissed the statement as stress-induced. The villagers didn't. By November, the story of the vanished nuns had spread far beyond Kilvara. Irish newspapers ran headlines calling them the Ghost Sisters of Kilvara. Some theorized they had fled religious life. Others whispered of darker explanations, that they'd uncovered something in the church they weren't meant to see. One rumor claimed they had found an underground chamber beneath the chapel, a sealed room from the 1600s, left untouched since the abbey's destruction. Father Callan, when asked, refused to speak of it. He simply said, whatever they were looking for, it wasn't of this world. By December 1993, the official search ended. The sisters were declared missing without foul play. Their shop was boarded up. The convent sent new sisters to the parish, though none stayed long. And as winter set in, the people of Kilvara began to forget. But not everyone did. Because late that Christmas Eve, a young altar boy cleaning the chapel claimed he heard two voices singing in the crypt, soft, indistinct, and in harmony. When he opened the door to look, the sound stopped, and the only thing he saw was the faint glow of candlelight fading into the cracks of the stone floor. But time has a way of burying stories deeper than truth itself. For nearly 3 decades, the Rowan twins remained only a legend whispered after Mass, a ghost tale told to tourists. Until the summer of 2021, when workmen arrived to finally renovate Kilvara Chapel and uncovered something no one was prepared to see. Years passed, then decades, and the disappearance of Sister Aileen and Sister Brigid Rowan became one of those stories people in Kilvara spoke of only when the rain was heavy and the lights flickered in the pub. The old Rowan shop was boarded up after 1993. 4 years, the church tried to sell the property, first to a young couple, then to a bakery chain, then to a craftsman from Cork. Each time, the deal fell through. One buyer backed out after spending a single night in the flat above the store. He told Father Callan he'd been woken by the sound of 2 women humming hymns, faint but close, as if coming from inside the walls. Father Callan said nothing. He only pressed a rosary into the man's hand and whispered, "They've never really left." By the late 2000s, the shop had become a relic, ivy creeping up the sides, the painted sign Rowan Sisters Grocer and Bread barely legible under layers of weathered wood. Yet every October, someone left a bunch of lilies by the door. No one ever saw who. In 2008, Father Callan passed away quietly in his sleep. The parish was taken over by a younger priest, Father O'Donnell, who had no memory of the twins except from yellowed newspaper clippings. He found their story fascinating and troubling. Once, during evening prayer, he mentioned the nuns' disappearance to a few of the elderly parishioners. A hush fell over the pews. An old woman named Mrs. Doyle simply said, "They were chosen." That's what Father Callan told them. Chosen to find something that was never meant to be found. But when Father O'Donnell asked what that meant, she shook her head and turned away. In 2012, a local historian named Eamon Riley came to Kilvara to research the ruins of St. Fionnan's Abbey, the same site the sisters had mentioned before their disappearance. He interviewed long-time residents, examined parish records, and walked the overgrown paths where the search parties once stood. His notes later described the site as eerily preserved, the ground too even, the moss too thick, as if something beneath it refused to let the earth breathe. When he mapped the abbey's layout against the village, Eamon noticed something unsettling. The ruins aligned perfectly with the foundation of the current Kilvara Chapel, built in 1854, almost as if the new church had been built directly over the heart of the old one. Strange events began to happen soon after Riley's visit. The church bell, untouched, would ring exactly at 8:15 p.m. on some nights, the same time Mary Hanlon had last seen the twins in 1993. During storms, parishioners claimed to hear 2 voices singing Latin verses through the chapel vents. And once, when a group of teenagers dared each other to spend a night in the churchyard, they returned at dawn pale and trembling. They said they'd seen 2 shadows kneeling near the altar, motionless, hands clasped in prayer, and when lightning struck, the shadows vanished, though no one else was there. In 2018, nearly 25 years after the disappearance, the diocese began organizing a restoration project for the chapel. Roofing, foundation repairs, a full historical preservation. During preparation, Father O'Donnell discovered an old envelope wedged behind the confessional wall. It was yellowed and brittle, sealed with wax. On the front, in faint ink, were the words, for whoever tends his house after us." Inside was a fragment of paper in Sister Brigid's hand. Only a few lines remained legible. "If the ground opens again, do not look with fear, for what was buried was never meant for daylight." No one could explain how the letter got there, but it was enough to convince the church that the restoration had to proceed carefully. The project was delayed for years, until finally, in the summer of 2021, a team of workers was hired to begin. They would start by reinforcing the foundation beneath the altar, the very spot where, 3 decades earlier, police had searched and found nothing. It was a Wednesday morning in late July. The men had been working for hours, breaking through old stone, removing decayed timber. And then, one of them, Patrick Lenehan, a local laborer, struck something that didn't sound like rock or soil. It was hollow. He called his supervisor. Together they cleared the dust away until they saw it, the outline of a tin box, rusted and sealed shut. It was wedged deep beneath the altar's base. When they pried it open, a wave of stale air rose from inside, and what they saw made them both step back. A small rosary, silver links dulled by time, lay inside. Its crucifix was broken clean in two, identical to the one found at St. Fianan's Abbey years earlier. And next to it, something folded. A second letter. Damp, barely legible. They handed it to Father O'Donnell immediately. The parish priest didn't say a word when he read it. He simply crossed himself, closed the box, and told the men to stop all work until further notice. But word spread quickly through Kilvara, and by nightfall the whole village gathered outside the chapel gates, whispering the same question. Could it really be them? The answer, it seemed, was buried beneath the chapel all along. But what lay beneath was not just the rosary. It was something much older. Something the Rowan twins had apparently found, and tried to hide forever. The morning after the discovery, Father O'Donnell sat alone in the sacristy, the rusted tin box beside him. He had read the damp letter 3 times before the ink began to dissolve under his tears. It was signed simply, Sister Brigid Rowan, October 21st, 1993. The letter was short, but its contents would haunt Kilvara forever. To whoever finds this, we have unearthed what should have remained in silence. Beneath this church lies the room of the condemned, where prayers were twisted into bargains long before our vows. The light that burns here is not his. We have sealed the door, and we will keep watch, in body or in spirit, until the earth takes us. Do not open it. Pray for our souls. The bottom half of the page had almost disintegrated, but faint impressions of 2 fingerprints remained in the corner, pressed into the paper before the ink had dried. They were side by side, identical. The fingerprints of twins. Despite the priest's warnings, rumors of the sealed door beneath the altar spread fast. Local officials, curious, requested that the site be examined by historians and safety inspectors before renovations resumed. Within a week, a team arrived, among them, Dr. Riley, the historian who had once mapped the abbey's ruins. Using ground radar, they confirmed what Brigid's letter hinted. There was indeed a sealed chamber beneath the church floor, about 10 feet below the altar. Its walls were stone, circular, and older than the current chapel. Much older. When they finally broke through the upper layer, what they found wasn't what anyone expected. The chamber was small, no larger than a bedroom. At its center stood a wooden table, half-rotted, with 2 rosaries laid side by side. Around them were candle stubs, melted long ago. And carved into the wall above the table was a Latin inscription. Dui sorores custodes. 2 sisters keep watch. Tests later dated the carvings and the chamber to the early 1600s, when Kilvara was part of a monastic settlement. Historical records suggested that 2 nuns from the old abbey had volunteered to guard a relic after the monastery was destroyed, a relic said to contain the remains of a saint, though none was ever confirmed. But some accounts hinted at something else, that the relic was not a saint's bone, but a relic of penitence, a cursed symbol used in forbidden rituals during Ireland's religious wars. Whatever it was, it had been sealed away, and over centuries, forgotten. Until Aileen and Brigid Rowan found it. Investigators never publicly stated whether any remains were found in that chamber. The church issued only one statement. The area beneath Kilvara Chapel has been consecrated anew. The remains found were reinterred with full rites. The Rowan sisters are remembered in our prayers. No further explanation. No records released. But in Kilvara, the people believed differently. They said the twins had offered themselves as keepers, to guard what was buried, to protect the village from what should not rise again. And when the chamber was opened in 2021, the long silence of their vigil was broken. Weeks after the discovery, parishioners reported something strange. Every night at exactly 8:15 p.m., the chapel lights flickered once, just once, then steadied again. On the first Sunday after the consecration, Father O'Donnell led a memorial mass for the Rowan twins. The church was filled beyond capacity. Villagers, travelers, reporters, all gathered in the candlelight. When the choir began the final hymn, the organ produced an unexpected harmony. 2 soft voices, layered beneath the music, perfectly in tune. The congregation heard it. And none of them sang after that. They simply listened, tears running down faces, as the sound of twin voices filled the chapel for the first time in 28 years. They say faith is the bridge between what we can prove and what we can only feel. For the village of Kilvara, that bridge was built by 2 women whose devotion defied the boundaries of life and death. In the years since, the old shop has been restored and reopened, its sign freshly painted. Rowan Sisters, Bread and Grace. A portion of every loaf sold goes toward the upkeep of the chapel where their rosary was found. And each October, lilies still appear on the doorstep, placed there quietly, faithfully, by someone who never forgets. If you ever visit Kilvara and attend Mass, you might notice that at the close of each service, the final bell rings twice, not once. The locals say it's for them. For the sisters who kept watch beneath his house. For the nuns who vanished, but never truly left. This has been the story of Sister Aileen and Sister Brigid Rowan, the twin nuns of Kilvara who disappeared in 1993, and whose rosary was found 28 years later in the unlikeliest place. If you found this story as haunting and mysterious as we did, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to our channel. Your support helps us uncover more forgotten stories that still echo through time. Until next time, stay curious, stay safe, and as always, keep your light on.